Ezekiel 4:9. One verse, 6 ingredients, and a recipe God gave a prophet to keep him alive through a siege. And it still holds more protein than the bread sitting in your kitchen right now. This wasn't a chef's recipe. It wasn't a health trend. It was written down in scripture, thousands of years before anyone had a word for amino acid or glycemic index. 6 foods, named in one verse, combined into one loaf. No modern lab designed this. No food company patented it. It's been sitting in the Bible the entire time, in plain text, for anyone to read, and it still outperforms almost everything on a grocery shelf today. So what exactly did that verse say to combine? Because it's not what's rising in your kitchen right now. Stick around, because item number 5 on this list is the one nutritionists say does something to your blood sugar that white bread simply can't. People in every corner of the world are rediscovering what their ancestors already knew about food. Subscribe to be one of them, and comment where you're watching from. Let's see how far this actually reaches. Let's start with wheat, the base grain. It's the first ingredient named in the verse, and it's still the anchor of the loaf today. But this isn't the bleached, stripped-down flour in a standard sandwich loaf. Left whole and sprouted, it keeps its fiber and B vitamins instead of losing them in processing. Sprouting also breaks down some of the starch, which is part of why this bread tends to sit lighter on the stomach. It's the backbone that lets everything else, the legumes, the seeds, bind into something you can actually slice. But the next ingredient on this list isn't a grain at all, and it's the one doing most of the heavy lifting on protein. Barley was a staple in the ancient world specifically because it grew where wheat couldn't, in poorer soil, in harsher seasons. It was famine food before it was healthy food. It's especially high in beta-glucan, a type of soluble fiber tied to healthier cholesterol levels. It has a lower glycemic response than refined wheat flour, meaning less of a blood sugar spike. And it adds a dense, chewy texture that keeps this loaf from ever resembling fluffy white bread. But the beans in this recipe are doing something wheat and barley physically cannot. This is where the loaf stops being just bread and starts acting more like a protein source. Grains alone are missing certain essential amino acids. Beans fill in exactly what's missing. Combined with grains, beans help create a complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids in one slice. They add resistant starch, which feeds gut bacteria instead of spiking blood sugar. And they boost the fiber content well beyond anything in a standard loaf. The next ingredient is the one modern nutritionists specifically call out for its iron. Lentils show up constantly throughout ancient diets, and for good reason. They're small, they store well, and they punch far above their size nutritionally. They're a strong plant-based source of iron, which matters most for anyone eating little or no meat. They add folate, important for cell repair and energy metabolism. And like beans, they pair with grain proteins to round out the amino acid profile. Item number 5 is the one that actually changes how your body processes the sugar in this bread. Millet is a small, round grain that's mostly fallen out of Western diets, but it's still a staple in parts of Africa and Asia, and it behaves differently in your body than wheat does. It's naturally gluten-free on its own, though this particular loaf is not, since it's blended with wheat and barley. It digests more slowly than refined grains, which translates to a gentler rise in blood sugar. And it's rich in magnesium, a mineral tied to steadier energy levels throughout the day. The next ingredient is the one most people have never even heard of. Spelt is technically a relative of wheat, but it's an older, less modified variety, meaning it hasn't been bred over centuries the same way modern wheat has. It contains a slightly different protein structure that some people find easier to digest than standard wheat. It's higher in certain trace minerals, including manganese and zinc, and it has a nuttier flavor that gives this loaf its distinct, dense character instead of a bland sameness. The last piece isn't a listed ingredient at all. It's the process that changes everything about how this bread behaves in your body. Every one of those grains and legumes is sprouted before it's ground into this bread, and that single step is arguably doing more nutritional work than any individual ingredient. Sprouting increases the bioavailability of nutrients, meaning your body can actually absorb more of what's there. It reduces some of the compounds in raw grains that otherwise block mineral absorption. And it's part of why one slice of this bread can land at roughly 4 to 5 grams of protein, noticeably more than a slice of standard white bread. If you've made it this far and this is actually helping, drop a comment with which ingredient on this list surprised you most. I read every single one. Let's run it back fast. Wheat for the base and the B vitamins. Barley for the fiber and the lower blood sugar spike. Beans for the complete protein. Lentils for the iron and folate. Millet for the slow digesting carbs. Spelt for the minerals and easier digestion. And sprouting, tying it all together, unlocking nutrients the raw grains were holding back. Every one of these ingredients is still sitting on a shelf today, some of them in your own pantry right now. And most of us walk right past all of them for a loaf that's mostly refined flour, sugar, and preservatives, because it's softer and it's cheaper. The bread written into scripture as survival food is healthier than the bread most people eat by choice. 3,000 years later, the emergency bread is still outperforming the everyday one. If you want to keep learning what eating actually looked like before food came in a box, hit subscribe. I post a new one of these every week, and I genuinely love to have you here. And if you want to go deeper on this, check out the description. I have a biblical home healer book I want you to get. Order yours today.